I'm going to show you how to prepare, seal and paint this beautiful bespoke standing shelving unit. I started off by sanding all my cut edges, then sanded over the areas that had filler in, covering the screws. I applied a layer of Frenchic finishing coat across all the cut edges using my paintbrush. Then I applied it along the sides with a radiator roller to seal the filler. Once this had dried, I give it a gentle sanding down and applied a second coat of sealant across the whole unit. As for the painting, I used Frenchic's chalk paint, applied this on with a radiator roller and then feathered it off with my brush. I applied the paint on all the cut edges with the paintbrush. Once this is dry, I applied a second coat using the same methods, a small radiator roller and Frenchic's paintbrushes. So if you're looking for more 60-second tips, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. In this video, I'm going to show you how to prep, mask and spray paint your walls. Start by sanding all the areas down first. Then mask up the radiators and any electrical sockets that you don't want any paint going on. Then of course your windows and window frames. Dilute your paint if you're using a paint sprayer, give it a good mix up, then pour it into the reservoir and fasten the lid on. Test the paint flow on a piece of cardboard and then you're ready to start spraying your walls. I normally spray up and down from top to bottom and then I'll do a second coat from left to right. Then before it dries, remove the masking tape. Then you can touch up the ceiling and cut in your skirting boards using your paintbrush. If you're looking for more 60-second tips, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. In this video, I'm going to show you how to seal and paint this cast iron window frame. I applied a Frenchic finishing coat on with the paintbrush. It looks like a white milky substance when you're applying it and it's wet, but once it's dry, it's completely transparent. Once I completed one side, I placed 2 battens on my workbench, turned it over and then painted the other. It only takes a couple of minutes to apply and it dries within a couple of hours. Then it was ready for a second coat. Now the Frenchic finishing coat is dry, it's ready to paint. I'm going to use my paint sprayer, so I'm going to hang this on a piece of line that'll allow me to spray both sides. I'm using Wagner's small handheld paint sprayer and I'm applying Frenchic's al fresco paint. Once I've applied one coat, I'll leave this to dry for a couple of hours and then apply a second. If you're looking for more 60-second tips, head over to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. In this video, I'm going to show you how to prepare and paint wooden picket fencing with Frenchic paint using 3 different methods. Start off by sanding the surface of your fence using an orbital sander. Open your tin of paint, give it a good stir. My first application is using a paintbrush. Then another alternative is using a small radiator roller. Pour the paint into your tray, get plenty on the roller and start to apply on the surface. Then there's paint spraying. You may need to dilute your paint by 10 to 20% until you get a nice smooth runny consistency. Pop on your PPE and then start spraying, making sure you've got dust sheets or cardboard covering the surface below. Apply any finishing touches and you're done. If you want to see more 60-second tips, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. I'm going to show you how to prepare and paint your garage door so it lasts. Scrub the surfaces down using some sugar soap and a good hard scrubbing brush. Then give it a light sanding down if you don't know what type of paint's been on there originally. Fill in any holes with your filler, leave that to dry and then re-sand it again. Then you can apply some finishing coat. I normally apply this over the filler, so your first coat of paint is going to dry flatter. Now the paint I'm using is from the al fresco range and the colour is smudge. But I'm applying this on with 3 different methods. The first door using a large paintbrush, then the second door I'm using a small radiator roller. Now the next side of the door I'm using my small handheld paint sprayer. Once it's dry I applied the second coat using the sprayer. Now for the outside frame, I'm going to apply the paint on using a brush. Again, it's the al fresco range, but this time the colour is blackjack. For more videos, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. I'm going to show you how to paint a door and frame 2 different colours between 2 rooms. Give all your woodwork a good scrub down with some sugar soap. Now apply your masking line tight up on the outside edge of the slab strip. That's right in the middle of the door frame. Then you can start to apply your paint. I'm using Frencic's Victory Lane paint from the Alfresco range. Straight out of the tin and applying it on with Frencic's oval brush. I'm cutting it in nice and tight all the way along the edge of the masking tape, feathering over it from top to bottom. Now with the door, I'm going to start by painting the 6 panels. Again, applying the paint on to follow the grain. Once you complete this, do the cross members of the bar on the door and the uprights from left to right. Now I need to cut in nice and tight freehand along one edge of the door to meet the other coloured paint. Leave your paint for at least 2 hours to dry and then it's ready to apply a second coat. Do this in the same order as your first coat. To watch the full video and for further tips, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. This is how I transformed this old fireplace. Started off by masking the areas up around it, then cleaned it over using some sugar soap. Once it was scrubbed up, I rinsed it and dried it off. Then I had to sand the surfaces to help the new paint key. A quick dust off and hoover up, and now it's ready to paint. You've got 3 options of applying your paint. One option is applying it with a paintbrush. Use a large one to spread most of the paint on, then a small brush to feather it out. Or you could use a 4-inch roller. Apply it on and then feather it out with your brush. Or if you happen to have a handheld paint sprayer, this is going to be your quickest option. Once the areas are masked up, hold the nozzle about 4 inches away from the surface and continue the movement all the way across the area. If you're looking for more 60-second tips, like and subscribe. I'm going to show you how to prepare and paint your metal radiators. Mix up some Frenchic sugar soap with some warm water and start to scrub the surface of your item, making sure you clear away all the grease and grime. Then wipe this off with a damp cloth. Once you've dried it, you can give it a gentle sanding down. And if you come across any rust spots, give these a good sanding off, then mask the areas where you don't require any paint. Now you're ready to apply your paint. I'm using Frencic's trim paint and the colour is Cool Beans. It's part of the Samaritans range. If you're applying it on with the brush, start at one end and work your way up and down following the contours of the radiator. Then feather over it gently just to make sure you're spreading it evenly and avoiding any drips. And of course you can always apply the paint using a radiator roller, but it still needs to be feathered off with a paintbrush. Frenchic's trim paint also works amazingly well if you're applying it with a paint sprayer. For more videos like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. I'm going to show you how to clean, prepare and paint previously painted decking planks. It's vital to ensure that the surface and structure is in a suitable and dry condition. The pre-painted boards need to have a good scrubbing down with a sugar soap. Then rinsed off and dried. Check the boards to see if there's no decay or damage. Then you can use a wire wool brush to remove any flaky or loose paint. Then give them a light sanding down before you apply your paint. You can paint straight out of the can without no dilution. Leave for 4 hours under normal conditions before applying your second coat. It's advisable to take your shoes off for the first 3 weeks until it's completely cured. For more 60-second tips, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. I'm going to show you how to paint scallop effects on your walls. Start by measuring the height you want your first scallop line. Draw a straight level line around the room using a spirit level. Then apply a piece of masking tape across, wipe off the pencil line, then you can start to apply your first coat of paint. This creates a perfect line across the wall once you've removed your masking tape. Put some fresh masking tape along the back of a plate. Mark up a top arrow. Place this on your line and scribe a line round with a pencil. Then if you've got any corners, you're going to need to cut out a piece of cardboard the same size as your plate. Then take your paintbrush and carefully start to cut in around your pencil scallop shapes. Once you've done one, you can let it dry, apply a second coat, and then even use a darker colour and create an ombre effect. You can do as many scallop lines as you wish. To see the full video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint your spindles, handrail and newel post. When painting any item, preparation is really important. First, sand down all the surfaces the best you can. If you're using a paint sprayer, you will need to mask up around the areas that you don't want any paint going on. If you happen to have holes, you will need to fill these with some filler, let that dry and then sand it down and it's ready to paint over. When applying it on with a brush, you may see some brush strokes, but don't worry, they'll flatten out with Frenchic Paint. If using a paint sprayer, you will need to dilute the paint down by about 10%. Test this on a piece of cardboard first, then you're ready to paint. Hold the nozzle about 4 inches away from the surface and continuously move it up and down. Once you've applied your first coat, leave this to dry for 4 to 6 hours and then you can apply a second coat. And of course, you always give it a very light sanding down between coats. For more 60-second tips, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY.
In this 60-second tip, I'm going to show you how to paint terracotta pots so they last. You do need to give it a really good scrub down with the concentrated sugar soap beforehand. So I'm going to start my preparation by sealing my pot with Frenchic's finishing coat. This is touch dry within 15 to 30 minutes, so once it is, you can start on your second coat. Once your second coat is dry, for best results you can even apply a third coat. And then you're ready to start painting. The colours I've chosen are Dive In and Raspberry Punch from Frenchic's limited edition al fresco range. Millions of people across social media are hashtagging best paint in the world. Whenever Craig and I use it, it's always easy to see why. Now that my first coat is complete, I'm going to leave it to dry for a couple of hours before I come back and start my second coat. For more 60-second tips, subscribe to the YouTube channel Mr. and Mrs. DIY.
I'm often asked, can I use Frenchic wall paint in my Wagner paint sprayer? Well, the answer is yes, as long as you dilute it a fraction. Give it a good stir up in your can first, then pour it into the reservoir and add between 5 to 10% water. Stir this up, connect the head, and then you're ready to start paint spraying. I'm using the extension handle on my Wagner, which gives me an extra 2-foot reach, about 600 millimeters, which allows easy access to the ceiling. Now, before you fill the attachment up with your paint, make sure that the paint flow tube is pointing towards the back when you're spraying ceilings like this. This allows the paint to be drawn from the bottom of the reservoir when the paint's running low. As you can see, I've masked up around the sides, covering up the OSB walls so I don't get any overspray on them. When doing a large area like this, I tend to do about 1 metre at a time, spraying it from left to right, covering each passover by about 50%. Now, this extension handle works with almost all Wagner handheld paint sprayers from the consumer range. And as you can see, after diluting Frenchic's paint down, it's flying through the paint sprayer no problem. Considering this is only the first coat, I've got to admit, it's looking fantastic already. Once you've got your masking in position, this is about 4 or 5 times quicker than using the old-fashioned way of using a paintbrush and roller. Once you've applied your first coat, leave this to dry for about 20 minutes, then you can apply your second layer in a cross-coat fashion. When you're spraying indoors and above your head, do be sure to wear a dust mask and some safety specs. Hopefully I've inspired you to paint spray your ceilings. If you're looking for more inspiration, follow us on all social media handles and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY. I'm going to show you how to paint wooden floorboards with Frenchic's al fresco range. Preparation is the key. Give it a light sand first, clean it with sugar soap if required. Once you've sanded it, hoover all the dust and debris up. Then you're ready to start masking up around the skirting boards if you're painting the floor a different colour. Give your paint a good stir, dilute it down if you're applying it onto bare wood like me. I've diluted it just 5%, applied it with a small 4-inch radiator roller to cover an area and then feather it off with Frenchic's oval brushes. That gives her a nice smooth finish and you cover quite an area in a short space of time. Then give it a light sanding once it's dry before you start to apply your second coat. Again, same rules apply, roll the paint on with your 4-inch roller and feather it through with your brush, leaving 4 hours drying time between coats under normal conditions. For more 60-second tips, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mr. and Mrs. DIY.